People share their revenge tales that left them thinking, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. I got a coworker fired for incompetence. My manager wouldn't do it, so I saved up 3 months of failures by just documenting them all. I then took this to my director and got the woman fired. She was very unqualified for the position we held and was an absolute cunt most days. She posted all sorts of shit about being an independent woman. She was proud that she was able to support her 2 fatherless kids. She would often say things like, if we didn't have a woman in this office, nothing would ever get done, after doing something like changing the paper towel roll in the break room. Which, of course, was something our cleaning staff was already paid to do. She just liked to do things she was actually capable of. One time she was supposed to give a presentation at a hotel conference room and made it all the way past hooking up her laptop to the projector before she realized she didn't have the file on that laptop. It was only saved locally on her desktop in her office. You'd think we could just remote into it and grab the file? No, she is one of those tards who turns her enterprise workstation off. It was super embarrassing for our company. She was my Uber driver last week. When I was a kid, there was a girl at my school who was really weird. She never spoke above a whisper and had a super overprotective mom with these freaky giant long nails who she'd always rat people out to. If you crossed this girl in any way at all, her mom would be outside the fence at lunchtime and wave you over and tear you a new asshole. It got to the point where even her friends were kind of terrified, because if you so much as cheated at hopscotch, or whatever 7-year-old girls were playing at the time, I forget, there was the terrifying mom waiting for you. Eventually she threatened to tell her mom about me for something tiny. I don't even remember what I did. I avoided her as best I could. There must have been some insignificant interaction, like taking her coat hook or some crap. So I started telling everyone she was evil and to avoid her, and people actually did. This girl ended up with practically no friends except for one other girl. Things kind of evened out, but from then on, everybody was even more on eggshells around this girl, and most people chose not to interact with her at all for fear of her mom. In hindsight, mom was probably so overbearing that her kid never learned to interact for herself, but I don't think I really changed anything so much as to make people realize that the best way to avoid the mom was to avoid the daughter. Last I heard, the girl was in university and had a reputation for being super quiet, but she seemed normal enough. I still feel like a dickhead to this day. It might not be exactly revenge, but I felt like it. In middle school, I had a bully/tormentor we'll call Chuck. Chuck was about 2 years older than everyone else because he'd been held back twice. Chuck was a monster. Huge kid, especially since he was an 8th grader in 6th grade, and regularly tortured half the class. He picked on me most often out of the group, but everyone despised him. One day, after he grabbed me by the backpack and threw me against the lockers, I came home upset. My dad said, "Don't worry about him. Guys like that will be changing your car's oil one day." Fast forward a month or so, and we're in art class. The teacher leaves the room, and Chuck starts laying on me and threatening to beat me up. I'd had enough, so I replied with something like, "Fine, Chuck. I don't care. Beat me up. No one here will laugh at me because you're bigger than all of us. You can beat up anyone in the room. Who cares? Do it. No one will give a damn." At this point, the class started getting behind me and laughing. Yelling insults at him. I still remember him looking panicked and saying, "Shut up, I'm sick of you talking. You're stupid." Since I had the support of the mob, I leaned into it and started telling him he was stupid, his parents hated him, he'd been held back twice because he was so stupid, etc. Chuck was visibly shaking and about to start crying at this point. He had no power, and the whole class was suddenly against him. So I went for the kill. "Don't care, you can beat us up, Chuck. You'll be changing my oil one day." After repeating my dad's line, I realized I messed up. Chuck was about to beat the shit out of me. Thankfully, the teacher walked back into the room a few seconds later, saw the commotion about to start, and sent him to the other side of the room. Fast forward about 7 to 8 years. I was in my sophomore year of college and came home for the weekend. I took my car to Jiffy Lube for an oil change. Everything was normal, but then Chuck walked into the lobby holding my car's air filter. "Sir, this is pretty caked with dirt, do you want a new one?" I don't think Chuck recognized me, but I realized he was literally the tech changing my oil. Seeing him as beaten down as he was, working in a hot fucking oil change shop in early summer, made me feel horrible inside. I have been friends with this girl since we were 11. She was kind of awful, but I still hung out with her. She'd try to embarrass me in front of our friends, and she was always trying to tell me what to eat and what to wear. It was weird. When we were in our mid-20s, she finally found a guy suitable for her and her family, rich, same religion, rich, etc., and got engaged. I don't know why, but she really wanted to swing even though her fiancé didn't really want to do it. But he went along with it. It was a disaster. She got hers, he didn't get his. They fought. She still insisted on seeing the other dude swing with him. It was just a mess. Anyway, one day we got into this huge fight because she didn't approve of my new boyfriend or whatever. I was so fed up with her and her shit that I told my mom, who happened to be very good friends with her mom, about the swinging, knowing my mom would tell her mom. It just spiraled out of control, and everyone in her family found out. Her finance, who was such a nice dude, was so embarrassed, and I guess I just didn't think about how it would affect him. I still feel bad for that guy. I really hope he got a prenup. Great, the one time I have something to contribute, and it's about a time when I went to. Oh well. When I was in 5th grade, I was picked on by some bullies in my class. Nothing physical, just dumb shit like making fun of me and calling me names, etc. There was certainly nothing that warranted what I did to him. I still feel disgusted about doing it to this day, but this was my revenge plot. There was a rumor going around that his parents were physically abusive because he didn't like to go home after school and he would come to class with bruises and whatnot sometimes. The guy was really not bright and was easy to anger, so one day, I started talking crap to him. And I laid it on thick. And when he got to the point where he was visibly shaking from anger, I started saying stuff like, "What are you going to do about it? Are you going to hit me? I bet you're too chicken to hit me." And sure enough, he punched me square in the face and bloodied my nose pretty good. Immediately after he hit me, I smiled and told him, "I bet you're going to get suspended. I wonder what your parents are going to think about this." The look of horror on his face when I said that and he realized he fell right into my trap honestly haunts me to this day. After he got back from suspension, he never said a word to me again. So, back in junior high, one dude, for the sake of the story, we'll call him Werner, who was in the same math class as me, was a continuous ass to everyone, but often to me especially. After some months, I decided I had had enough. I went to a really active turtle/tortoise online forum, and in the subsection for buying and selling the animals and equipment, I posted a message that went something like this. "Hi, I am looking to start my turtle hobby. I need everything to start, including a turtle, maybe several. My budget is pretty big, and I am willing to buy a whole terrarium as well. I am best reached by phone on Monday to Friday between 12 and 4 p.m. Kind regards, Werner." Werner's mobile number. Basically, I expected him to get a few calls during the school hours and get his mobile confiscated a couple of times, but what followed was an absolute onslaught of people trying to sell their turtles and equipment to him. His phone was ringing constantly during the afternoon, and he started to get more and more irate with this. He often started screaming at the people trying to sell their stuff to him. Then, finally, in one math class, he gets a call. It's about a turtle. He completely flips out, smashes his phone, and goes completely mental. The teacher can't get him to calm down, and he shoves the teacher. This led to his getting kicked out of the course, mandatory therapy and anger management, and having to repeat the grade. Because of the math course. Sure, he was an ass, but he didn't deserve to lose a year of his life due to that. To this day, he has no idea how the phone call started. I was involved in a fantasy football league with some friends. I would constantly be looking at it on the weekends and leave my laptop unattended in my living room. My roommate at the time got a hold of my laptop when I was gone and decided to post something masquerading as me that was rather unflattering. All in good fun, no big deal. About a week later, I found he was still logged into his league on my laptop, which he had used briefly. In revenge, I posted a poll for his league mates to vote on, asking how many dongs they thought he could fit in his mouth with a variety of choices. Well, I found out shortly after by text from him that this league was with his coworkers, including the president of the company. He had to meet with the president and explain himself to all his coworkers. Needless to say, I felt like a horrible person and still feel guilt when it pops into my head. In my second year at uni, we had a housemate that we all liked to pull pranks on. He was insanely tall and liked to act like the alpha male, so we had to bring him down a peg or two. One day he's asleep, and my housemate says he's going to go into his room and throw a cup of water on him. For once, I felt bad for him, so I said I wasn't going to partake. 5 minutes later, my housemate runs back into his room giggling and locks the door, to which I say I guarantee you he's going to think it was me and mess with my room instead. Lo and behold, 5 minutes later I hear the door to my room open and close, so I walk in there to find an entire bucket of water upturned on my bed. At this point, I'm pretty pissed because I had nothing to do with the initial prank. So I go downstairs to the kitchen, find a huge dish bucket full of old dirty plates and cutlery, swimming in chunks of mold where the plates had been festering in it for at least a month, carry it to his room, and throw it over his head, covering him not only in moldy water but also some cutlery that I had failed to remove. As a result, I accidentally broke one of his PS4 controllers. He had to go take a long shower to wash the residue off himself, and the room smelt so bad that he had to sleep in the lounge for the next 2 weeks. In middle school, my good friend's mom died. We lived in a very religious town, but her family was not particularly religious. A few weeks after the funeral, my friend started acting strangely toward me. She would call me a bitch while she walked past me in the hallway at school. She'd give me the finger, and she started turning everyone against me. I had no clue why. I still have no clue, so one day my bestie and I are walking home after school, and this friend almost hits me with her bike, starts calling me names, and starts swearing at me. Before I could even think, I blurted out, "Why don't you go join your mom?" In hell? As soon as I said it, I regretted it. I got beat up at school the next day. Years later, in high school, I had the opportunity to apologize to her, and she accepted. I really shouldn't have said that. I still feel bad, more than 20 years later. I was bullied a lot when I was younger, and for the most part, I didn't act out against it. One day I'm in class, 7th grade, and until this grade, I was a model student. Never in any trouble, and especially didn't start shit. Anyway, we are assigned a group project and told who our partner is. I was partnered with a kid who proceeded to smack me over and over with a ruler. I asked him to stop, I then told him to stop, but neither worked. Eventually I got fed up with it, and after one good smack, I took my play scissors, the round tip kind, in my hand and put them around his wrist or forearm area. I told him to smack me again and see what happened. He followed this up with a ruler to the side of my face, and the rest you can pretty much guess. It didn't start bleeding at first, but when it did, I knew I messed up. When I saw my dad walking up my school stairs, his neck was literally pulsing. I remember looking over to the security guard escorting me and telling him, "Just kill me, as I'm probably never going to see the light of day again." Needless to say, that kid will never forget me, but I regretted my actions immediately. I only wanted to scare the kid, not really cut him. I'm not sure why I thought play scissors wouldn't break skin, but I was enraged and not thinking straight. When I first became an electrician, an older journeyman decided to teach me not to leave my stuff laying around by taking 50+ small zip ties and encased my lineman's pliers and clines. He was also trying to tell me I needed to buy some dikes or diagonal cutters. A tin knocker saw all of this go down and quietly gave me a very long, heavy-duty zip tie and suggested I put it on his truck's drive shaft so he'd spend time looking for the noise. The older journeyman didn't show up for 2 days after I put the zip tie on because his truck broke down on the way home. Apparently the zip tie got hung up in his drive shaft, transmission yoke, pillow block, and differential yoke all got destroyed, which also took out the exhaust system just after the headers, and it managed to crack the fiberglass dually fender on the passenger side. He ended up buying a new truck shortly after that, and I never told him about the zip tie. Junior year in high school, we had gathered at a friend's house to play some D&D. Someone had brought a 2-liter Coke bottle that had been filled with tequila. We had mostly ignored the alcohol and focused more on the game. All but one of us kept our drinking reasonable. One guy had decided to get completely sloshed. He was stumbling around, being obnoxious and making lots of racket. A friend's mom was in her room, and then he started puking. We took him outside, but he kept coming back in the house and throwing up on the carpet. We had finally had enough of his shit and decided to take him home. We loaded him into the back of my friend's pickup and took him to his house. It was late, and his parents were asleep. We opened the door and pushed him in. We could see him kind of stumbling across the living room through the front window. One of my friends was like, "You know what? Fuck him," and started ringing the doorbell and pounding on the front door. Our drunk friend stopped and faced us with a look of absolute horror on his face. We all hopped in the pickup bed and sped off. As we were driving away, we could see lights coming on all over his house. 16 years old, drunk as shit, and wearing vomit-covered clothes, his parents were less than happy. We didn't see him for a long time. We probably should have just gone outside with him, locked the door, and stayed with him until he had settled down and sobbed up a little. I kind of felt sorry for him after his parents had gotten through with him. I was jealous of a kid in my senior year creative writing class, high school. We had to submit weekly fiction pieces, and everyone in class would read each other's stories and discuss them in class. This guy never wrote his own pieces, he actually had the balls to submit short stories he found online. Our teacher was not technologically savvy and way too trusting of his students, so it was never obvious to him. The kid received glowing praise every week in class, and it infuriated a lot of people to sit there and watch the teacher gush over this fraud. I finally decided to do something and snitched. He was nailed for cheating and failed the class, resulting in a failing grade for his English requirement. This was problematic for him because he had applied early to one school, and it was now late into his senior year when he could no longer apply to schools. Because of a failing grade, this crushed his GPA, and somehow the university was also aware of the cheating. They reversed their admission, and he had to spend a year at home. During that year at home, when he otherwise would have been at school, he was hit by a car and is now paralyzed from the neck down. Over a decade ago, when I was a teenager, we used to have bonfires out in a secret spot in the woods. One night we went out there, and another group we didn't know also came through. They seemed nice and were doing their own thing most of the night. It was a big open space, so our group stayed mostly separate. We brought 230 racks for about 6 people, so we obviously didn't end up finishing all of it. We got up and left at around 1 a.m., while the other group was still there. We get out of the woods and into our car, only to immediately see 3 of the guys from the group emerge from the woods. They blocked our car off and demanded we give them our beer or they'd kick our ass. The driver laughs in the guy's face, drops into gear, and peels out toward them. They jump out of the way, and we get away laughing and yelling insults at the idiots. Well, we're teenagers with chips on our shoulders, and somebody has wronged us. So, we went back and smashed out every window and headlight on the main guy's decked out VW Jetta. We later found out that he was friends with a few mutual acquaintances. He told them about the incident at a party, conveniently leaving out the fact that they attempted to rob us, and said it cost them upwards of $2,000 because they had no insurance. Our revenge was definitely way out of proportion, but I still don't really feel bad. That guy was trash. I had a big group of friends from 13 to 18, and when we were 17, one of them stole my girlfriend. To be fair, he legitimately knew we were going out. He got her drunk and shagged her at a party. He knew I'd find out. He said to my face that he didn't care. Tough shit, mate. It was her fault as well, of course. She wasn't passed out or anything like that. She'd been leading him on and was sober enough to consent, if drunk enough to get over the social stigma of actually doing it. So from that point on, our group of friends just cut this guy out of our circle. We stopped inviting him to stuff. If he tried to hang out, we told him to piss off. Mates who had been friends with him since primary school just ignored him. Initially, I was super proud of this show of solidarity from my brothers. My best friend was actually dating my now ex-girlfriend's best friend, and he split up with her because of her attitude about the whole thing, trying to defend her friend to him and make him hang out with them as a foursome. So, first summer back from university, we're all 19 to 20. We see him in a local pub. I don't know what to do. I decide to try and be cool about it and go up to say hi. He tells me to fuck off. I guess he blames me for all his friends cutting him out of his life. I don't get the chance to explain that I in no way asked them to do that, they just did what they saw as the right thing. 2 weeks later, we're in the same pub, and I see his younger sister. She's 17 now and very, very attractive. I start a conversation with her about her brother and how I feel bad about what we did. She says that it did really hurt him, but he's got some new friends now, mostly from uni, and is still with my ex, despite a long-distance relationship over the uni semesters. He won't talk to any of us old friends, though, which I think is a genuine shame. He's known some of the guys since we were 5. One drink leads to another with this girl, and we end up back at her house. Her parents are away, her brother is staying at my ex's flat, she has her own flat, she didn't go to university, she got a job, so the house is empty. We end up shagging. Next morning, her brother calls just as I'm leaving. The look on his face as he works out what's happened, he goes from utter despair to absolutely mental in about half a second. Eventually, I just had to leave. His sister finally managed to explain to him that it had nothing to do with revenge or anything and that I was genuinely sorry for how we treated him. I don't know if she told him the whole conversation we had about how I'd feel bad, as I didn't want to upset him anymore, and she convinced me to come back to hers by saying she was her own woman, could make her own decisions, and he wasn't due to be home at any time. If he hadn't randomly turned up, I hope he'd have never known. He still won't accept my Facebook friend request, though. I have to go all the way back to 2nd grade for this. So I'm not sure how it was at your elementary school, but in ours, birthdays were a big deal. Usually they involve the kids' parents coming in with sweets, goodie bags, and everything. In my class, there was a super annoying devil child, which I am convinced was spawned by Satan himself. Let's call her Miley. Miley was as bad of a kid as there ever could be. Talking back to the teacher, never doing her work, insulting how poor she thought the other kids were, and resorting to physical violence against everybody, especially the other boys. She knew that she could get a pass just because she was a girl, and for some reason, the teacher never really seemed to pick up on how horrible she was. There was something particular about this little Hannibal Lecter, though: lambs. She was absolutely obsessed with little white lambs. They were her favorite animals. She had them everywhere: book bags, temporary tattoos, notebooks, t-shirts, etc. Some of you can instantly see where this is going. Being from a Persian family, our diet consisted of a fair amount of lamb. And it was around this fact that my best friend at the time, let's call him Josh, and I hatched a plan. We'd both gotten sick of Miley, but my birthday was coming up. Instead of asking my mom to bring over cupcakes, her usual routine, I asked my dad to cook some authentic Persian kebab kubade so I could have my favorite meal at school. Being the only brown kid in my class, I think I passed it off as a cultural enrichment exercise. The trap was set. On my birthday, we all stayed in for lunch, and my dad brought over a huge tray of kebab. It was a huge hit. Kids were scarfing these things down like there was no lunch for the rest of the week. I distinctly remember looking over at Miley, who had just finished her first one. Josh wanted to put the final stage of the plan into action, but I held off. I wanted her to eat more. The best part? She was wearing a pink t-shirt with a picture of a lamb on it. I remember thinking at the time why she hadn't asked anyone what meat it was, as it was obviously red meat. It now occurs to me that she just figures it's beef, and that to spare her feelings, her parents have never told her that people actually eat lamb. We waited until she had eaten 3 kebabs. She pushed the paper plate away from her. Seemingly, she was done with her meal. Josh and I launched the final stage. We both walked up close to her table, and Josh asked me, "Say, Op, that's some good kebab. How do you even make such a thing?" And in the most obviously fake TV announcer voice I could. I said, "Well, it's easy. You just take a lot of beef and an equal part of lamb meat and mix it all together." Miley's eyes got wider than I knew eyes could get. She turned and asked me what I said. Josh simply told her it was made from that and pointed to the little lamb on her shirt. The reason why I regret this revenge choice so much is because, in that moment, I still remember watching her soul crumble. As horrible as she was still just a kid. Her eyes welled up immediately as she looked at the remains of her plate, then back down at her shirt. That's when the crying started. And when I say crying, I mean bawling. And when I say bawling, I mean inconsolable. She cried so loudly that I remember the teacher being mortified, shaking her by the shoulders and asking her what was wrong. She had no words. Just more tears. At the time, I hate to admit it, but I was loving it. But now, all this time later, it still bothers me what I chose to do. You might think I'm being too hard on myself. After all, she was never in physical danger like in the other stories on this thread. But what will always stick with me is the fact that this all happened around lunch. She was whisked off to the office, where, as I was leaving at 3 p.m., I could still hear her crying. And she was never the same after that, either. Not as mean, sure. But I don't think I saw her smile even once for the rest of the year. Her family ended up moving away that summer. I'm sure it was unrelated, but that just means I never saw her again. Not exactly a tale of revenge, citizen, as I uphold the law and exercise my rights as an officer to eliminate threats to society if peaceful resolutions are no longer an option. In high school, 2 classmates were killed by a train they were attempting to speed past. Some of their friends decorated their lockers the next day, as friends do, because they cared about them and loved them. They were not some of the popular teens in the school, and one of the uptight preppy girls complained to the principal that their lockers shouldn't be decorated because they didn't do anything for the school, which who cares, but since her family was a pillar of the community she got her way, and the vice principal had the decorations taken down. I was in the office doing TA things when this went down, and when the girl left to go back to her class, I left with her and stopped her down in the hallways and asked her what her problem was with people grieving and losing a friend. She said they weren't important, and no one cares. I told her I hoped she had to suffer losing people close to her suddenly, like our classmates, and I wouldn't feel sorry for her. I then told her I hoped she'd get AIDS. About a year later, her mom discovered she had a brain tumor, which killed her within a year. Her grandparents also died in a house fire the same year. Feel bad for the family. I never felt bad for her. In high school, which would be late elementary in the US, I guess, there was this kid who wasn't unpopular per se, but a little awkward. The last day before the summer holidays, he played with us during the morning break. Things get a little rough, and there's some light wrestling involved. Nothing too serious, No one got hurt except for some red ears. But the kid turned out to not be the silverback of our schoolyard. We walk back into class and continue the day as any other. Get on the bus home, he is still being a little sour with the rest, and start enjoying our summer holidays. Yay! A week later, my dad summons me into his study, fuming and enraged. He got a letter from the kid's dad, according to which I had beaten the boy up so badly that he came home sniveling. According to the letter, he was in so much pain that he could barely walk. The letter laid out in detail how the boy would not be able to enjoy the family's vacation on the first day of summer despite his grave injuries. I was expected to come up with one hell of an injury, because otherwise we'd get fire and fury from the police and their lawyers. After some frantic back and forth shouting, my father eventually believed me that I didn't, in fact, beat the guy up. My father wrote a conciliatory letter to try to work out what precisely had happened. The other family wasn't having that, though, and began collecting statements from witnesses. It turns out that several teachers stated in writing that the kid appeared to be completely fine throughout the entire day, did not appear to be in distress or pain, and had interacted with them and other students completely normally. Whoopsie. The other family concluded that there had been a misunderstanding. I was pretty pissed at the guy because I seriously expected to get beaten up badly at home and be in a ton of trouble had this gone otherwise. So once school started, I waited until our entire, male, class was assembled and then told the story with appropriate snark to the rest of the class, a nasty snitch move. From that moment on, that kid spent years at the bottom of the hierarchy and was the butt of every joke for a long time. That time must have been really shit for him. I regret that deeply. Because the kid was actually genuinely nice, if a little awkward, and grew up to be a pretty decent adult. And to his credit, once school started, he came to me and tried to explain the situation to me. The gist was that it was his overprotective parents who were the real trouble, not him. But I was so pissed because I could have gotten into so much trouble over nothing, just out of someone else's spite. But during the entire summer, I hadn't even gotten an apology or any admission of wrongdoing, and I was left doubting myself. There was also no attempt by the parents to get us to talk to one another. That's deeply regrettable. I wish someone clever had helped us get through that situation. Some girl hit my car in a hit and run. There was a witness to the crime, so the police were able to track her down. When I was asked if I wanted to press charges, I went for it. Turns out she had no license or insurance. She kept trying to fight the charges but wound up getting sued by my insurance, having to pay me restitution via the court system, and 4 separate charges between all her crimes, all of which included a decent fine. She was some 18-year-old single mom. I felt super bad by the end of it. Edit to add details, the damage wasn't significant. There was a small dent and a large scratch. It was all cosmetic damage. My deductible was small, but the total bill to my insurance was about $3,000. My car is over 10 years old, and had some other scratches already. I was way more upset that someone hit me and drove off than I was about the actual damage. I wouldn't have even bothered to get it fixed if the girl hadn't driven off. My pursuing her and pressing charges was 100% fueled by revenge, and her life got pretty fucked up from it. Yeah, what she did wasn't right, but I can emphasize with her being a scared 18-year-old who made a bad choice while caught up in the moment. Also, I'm not justifying her behavior because she had a kid, but it does make me feel bad for her. Being a single parent, as a woman or man, is a really expensive thing, and having a bunch of fees on top of that financial burden has got to suck. High school, oh man, this poor kid I used to work with at Wendy's. Kevin. He was a juvenile delinquent, he was a few years older than me, a little bit bigger than me, had nasty tattoos on his neck, and supposedly was out of jail on work release. He tried to be a tough guy and bully me whenever we worked together. Stuff like generally talking smack unprovoked, getting really close up in my face, and that stance where you puff out your chest and pull your arms back like you're going to swing. The most irritating was when he would walk right up in my face, then flinch like he was going to throw a punch at me, then just laugh and say some rude crap. I got along with just about everyone at work, and he did somewhat, but we just did not fit together. One day the exchanges between us were so apparent and obviously stressful that everyone working was talking about me fighting him. I dispelled these rumors because I wanted to keep my job, but my destiny on this day said otherwise. The first was the backdoor incident. The store had a large back door with a peephole in it, and it could only be opened from the inside. There was a buzzer outside that employees would push if they wanted back in. Well, Kevin was locked outside, and his patience while awaiting his re-entry had run out. Instead of tapping the buzzer, this guy was mashing it and holding it down while everyone inside went nuts. We were all busy, and I was running to the back to grab some heavy boxes. Holding these boxes, I was going to open the back door while I walked past. I tried to push on the door, but it wouldn't open. I leaned into it but couldn't push much more because of the boxes I was holding. I was in a hurry, so I yelled, "Get back, I am gonna kick the door." He did not hear me over the loud, constant buzzing. I gave that door a swift "this is Sparta" kick, and it opened about 3 inches, then bounced closed again. WTF? I kicked it again, and it opened, revealing a bashed and somewhat upset Kevin. He had been trying to look in the peephole when I kicked the door. I had just broken the crap out of his nose. Like the tip was almost touching his cheek, bright red, purple, swollen eyes, broken. He was pissed. Immediately, I started apologizing and backing away from him, but he came at me like a rabid monkey. Quickly, we were surrounded by employees and separated. I was told to go up front and manage fries and not come into the back part of the store until Kevin left for the hospital. Then the final event, less than 10 minutes later. I was working the fries, which entails grabbing a metal basket out of boiling hot oil and dumping the fresh fries into an adjacent tray. I was doing this, and everyone around me was talking about how I just broke Kevin's face. On his way from our store to the hospital, he decided to come right up to me again and try to instigate a fight while I was dumping some fresh fries. Kevin pulled his signature move of flinching at me like he was going to throw a punch. I retaliated by returning my own flinch with the basket I was holding. I didn't actually hit him with an incredibly hot fry basket. But I forgot about the boiling, hot oil still clinging to the basket. When I flinched at him and shook the basket, tiny, flaming hot drops of grease splattered his face and neck. I had just broken his nose on accident, then threw boiling hot oil on his face on accident. Instant fight. On the ground. I'm a wrestler, so his freshly broken and burned nose was just smashed and wiped across a dirty floor for a few seconds before it was broken up. He was an absolute mess. He left for the hospital, and I got sent home. That was it. No charges. No questions from my managers after. No more are scheduled with Kevin. There was not even any paperwork about 2 vicious assaults and fights on the same day. I felt really bad, but simultaneously, it was kind of justified. Both incidents were honest accidents that could have easily been avoided if he weren't such a jerk. I still felt like the outcome was worse than reasonable.